We are in Seattle downtown. We are at the historical Fifth Avenue Theater. Today, I have an amazing guest. I have Paul Hansen with me today. Hey, good to see you again, Paul.
How are you?
Good. Paul, we wanted to come up today and hang out with you because I think that there is an unsung hero to the world of theater, and I think that part of that is percussions.
Yes.
And so, Paul, give us a little bit of history about growing up as Paul Hansen here in the Northwest.
Oh, Lordy.
And so go ahead, speak away.
Okay. It would be almost impossible to say where to start because I grew up in a very musical family. My father was the organist at Plymouth Congregational Church across the street from here for 35 years.
His name is
Edward A. Hansen. Hi, Pop. And in 1965, when they had to rebuild the church across the street because of the earthquake in 64, all the church services were moved over here into the Fifth Avenue Theater upstairs here. And so for the next 2 years, every Sunday up on the Wurlitzer organ, Dad would come up playing away. And I'm a kid running around the building, looking backstage, looking under the stage, getting in the way of the crew. In the meantime, it was about that time I started taking drum lessons because we were all musicians in the family. So you start on snare drum, move over to timpani, move over to bells and things like that. And then at the same time, my father was also organist and music director on a local children's television show called Wanda over at King TV 5.
1950?
Well, he was on, the show was on for 30 years, I think roughly 52 through 73. He was on the show from 63 through 71.
What was that like growing up on backstage on a TV show?
It was a live show. It was on live every day at noon for a long time. And if we weren't in school, if we weren't doing anything, either me or my sisters would be down at the station on the set, watching the show being taped. And for me, I would most likely be sitting on the organ bench with Dad, watching him play the show. So Sundays, very official, church, religious music. Sure. Getting his doctorate at the University of Washington, he's studying Bach, Beethoven, Brahms, writing his doctoral thesis on Bach fugues. But at noon every day, he's accompanying the stories, he's accompanying the puppet shows, and it was basically an unscripted show. And he would just improvise,
live
show. They had a structure and they had notes and everything, but okay, Wanda sings this song, Wanda tells this story. Wanda talks to Daphne Duck. So all of a sudden, Dad grabs the duck call, and there's this whole conversation between Wanda on camera and Daniel.
Let me see, please, may I? Thank you.
And then later on, she does the bit with Wilting Willie, which was a flower that would wilt or not.
Really?
And so he grabs the slide whistle.
Really? And he is.
I'm sitting there, 5, 6 years old.
Just
That's a cool job.
Yeah.
And he's also taking us to the silent movies on weekends. So I'm watching the organist accompany the drama on film. And so that was, the first 10 years of my life.
Right.
Eventually I got into doing children's theater. I on a whim, auditioned for the very first acting company at Poncho Children's Theater, now known as Seattle Children's Theater. Got in, and for the next 3 or 4 years, I was doing children's theater. I was, actor training, dance training, vocal training, working the lights, working the backstage, getting the whole experience that you do when you're in theater education. But they kept sending me backstage to do music and sound effects.
This was just something they asked you to do?
This was just, I eventually got the impression my acting was probably lousy. So, however, I have carried that ever since, and that's where I was playing my first musicals, because they were doing musicals once in a while up there. You're a Good Man, Charlie Brown, Gertrude Stein's First Reader.
To a crowd of,
small theater, 300 or 400, children and parents. But it was children's theater. But that eventually led me to start working in the community theaters around the town.
Interesting.
There was, at the time, there was the Second Stage Theater, now no longer there, but that was a great training ground for a lot of us who were in high school and early college doing playing all the musicals.
Wow.
So I did a lot of that going through high school. And then by the time I got into college, I was already starting to work professionally, doing some of the bigger shows in town.
Where did you go to college at?
University of Washington. I went there because I wanted to study with that particular teacher, and I already knew everybody there. And I didn't really want to leave town at the time. I liked Seattle. I wanted to stick around. And at the time, when a big act would come to town, let's say Johnny Mathis or Liberace, Steve and Edie, something like that, they would come through town, rehearse a band, pick them up, take them to Portland, Spokane, Vancouver. They'd take them around 3 or 4 cities. You'd be gone like 2 weeks. And then they'd stop and move on to the next region. Well, almost the first thing that happened when I got into school, my teacher, who was getting ready to retire, was the one who would get hired for these shows. And he was finally getting tired of it. He said, "Kid knows what to do, send him." So there I am, I forget, 17 or 18 or something like that, on the Liberace band bus.
Wow.
With, all the old timers,
Sure.
and I'm on the bus and going, well, he plays with Benny Goodman and he plays with Count Basie and he was just like, what am I doing here?
Right.
At the same time, these guys all recognized that I was the kid.
Right. It was
next generation. He's nervous, he's scared, but he knows what he's doing. Don't mess with him. Bring him up, teach him the ropes, show him what works, show him what doesn't, tell him where to go and where not to go. I learned an awful lot from these wonderful people. And I spent my college years playing these acts. In the meantime, I'm studying to be a classical percussionist, but all this great theater and pop and all this other influences are affecting the direction I'm going.
Now, the influence, when you mentioned that, so at that point, or was it then that you realized that the influence was, this is really where Paul should be? Is that where your inspiration came from, or was it further on after your teenage years that really said, this touches me, I love this?
I think. Well, I mean, it must have started really young. Dad was buying me Spike Jones records as a kid, so that made was a whole parody of the music scene, and it was fun. So to me, it demonstrated that my dad, even though he was a very serious musician, but it was all supposed to be fun. It wasn't.
You need to say that it's got to be fun, right?
Yeah. I mean, he would demonstrate to me with these, with the sense of humor that he added to a lot of musical things.
Right.
And somewhere along the way, and I think it was early high school, I got called out to the University of Washington. I wasn't even going there yet.
Okay.
But I got called out there to play their college musical for whatever reason. One of the people out there couldn't do it for 2 or 3 nights.
Yeah.
And it was Sondheim's company, which was a great show, and it's not an easy book to play. But I'm in there after having watched a show once and not rehearsed it, and I'm playing the show, and I'm going,
you're doing this.
I think I'm pretty good at this.
Right.
Maybe I want to do this.
This is where it really started to turn.
This is really ringing my chimes. Yeah. So I think I really started to not concentrate on musical theater or anything like that, but it was just something that it was just always there. It was always in the back of my head, even though I was, in school, you're studying very legitimate, classical, you're really honing your craft to play everything, but there was always that thing there, just like, this is tugging me. This is really big. When I was just out of school, I was 21 or 22, I had a bad shoulder injury. I think just as a result of moving the gear too much or moving it the wrong way, and I couldn't pick up a pencil without screaming. I had torn something in here. Okay. So I thought I'd never play again. So I kind of had to drop the music for a long time. I went back to school to get a court reporter certificate, and because I knew I had friends who were doing that, and it was a good career, 9 to 5-er. But in doing that and following doctor's orders and all the therapy and everything else, my shoulder healed up. I got called to do a little musical up in Alaska, 5 Seattle musicians, 5 New York actors, and I thought, okay, I'll come up and do it. And when I got up there, it was just like, I'd come home again. It was just like, it felt so good to be playing again. It just felt that really was where I really was where I had to be, was playing that stuff. And eventually the Fifth Avenue started the musical theater company. It was 1989, and they brought me in. The contractor wanted me to be part of the regular orchestra hire, and it's been nothing but fun ever since. Yeah.
What? So let's go over some of the amazing shows that you've done, and you can pick out your favorites if you'd like. And I've seen some of your video.
Okay. Yeah.
I don't know how you can absolutely multitask the way you do. Trust me, it's an amazing talent.
It helps to be slightly ADD.
ADD,
yeah,
right?
Yeah.
So go ahead and go through some of the favorites that you've done here, and some of the people that you've worked with over the years, and some of the shows that you'd like to mention.
One of the true favorites, a little thing called Hairspray, which had its world premiere here, and just the experience of working with those folks, and for the very first time being there at the birth of a show.
Because it went from here to Broadway.
It went from here to Broadway, and so in the course of putting a show together, you're reading charts for the very first time, and you're, as an artist, you make a little bit of you can make suggestions. It depends on who you're working with, how far you can go with this.
And to be correct, the music is written specifically for you.
It was written for the orchestra. They didn't know us at the time.
Right.
They didn't know us at the time. They were writing what they wanted to, what they deemed was important for the show. But I was getting along well with the orchestrator and the conductor and the composer, Mark Shaman, and you'd make, you just start throwing little things into the show, and developing the part, until it. By the end of the run, it's blossomed into its own thing, and then that goes on to New York, and then the guy in New York, has his little thing with it before the show becomes officially locked down. So
Hairspray was one of the greats.
Hairspray was definitely one of the greats, and then later that year, doing Hair for the first time was for a lot of us in the theater. There's life before Hair and after Hair.
Okay.
Because you did really get involved in that show,
right? And
you became a really, really tight-knit family, and the band at the time became a really, really tight-knit group of people.
This whole industry seems to me that it's a family. It really is a family.
It's a very small. It's a small world. I mean,
you guys kind of move around to different theaters.
You move around to different theaters, and you work with a lot of the same people, and then you work with as new people come in, you get to know them. But even nationally, the world of musical theater musicians and actors and percussionists is very, very small. Facebook has made that smaller. The internet. We all get to know each other in the different cities.
Trade secrets, yeah,
and some of my secrets are remaining secrets because I'm not telling you how I did that effect.
And with effects, how about the instruments? Each production has certain items that you have to use or find. Is that a difficult task to do?
Sometimes it is. There's almost always a standard setup. You've got to have your timpani, you've got to have your xylophone, your vibraphone, your glockenspiel.
No idea.
Various cymbals, chimes and little things. But then there's always that big locker or trunk full of
kazoos,
kazoos and jaw harps and ocarinas and slinkies and bird calls to get just that right effect.
How long is it? Was it ever frustrating? Was there ever a show that you just were not sure if you were going to be able to find the right sound for the? I know that's a tough one.
Yeah, I'm sure there is, but I wound up finding some substitute. Well, there was a thing we did last year here where the orchestrator had written a note that was off the range off the standard range of the instruments, an instrument called crotale. I won't explain it now if you don't know what it is. So I actually called the company. I said, can you custom make me a B crotale? And they say, we don't do that anymore. So I just substituted something else.
Sure.
You know, I mean, there's always a way. The show I'm going into now, called My Heart is the Drum, that's at the Village Theater. I'm looking forward to that. And there are a lot of African drums required for that show. And I actually went out and rented some from some ethnomusicology friends, because I didn't think I could have the time to find the right instruments and the financial resources to actually buy all these things for instruments I may only use once.
Right.
But you know, I'm always willing to go out and find some things. I just located 2 1920s flexitones. Google it. Because there's certain pieces that you cannot play with modern-made flexitones, and just to find these old ancient instruments, I was like, give me those, you know.
Is there a show that you've ever wanted to do that you haven't done?
Pacific Overtures, Stephen Sondheim. Yeah.
No, you've done stuff for him before, though.
Oh, well, we've done a lot of Sondheim material. I've never worked directly with Sondheim.
Okay.
Yeah, but we've done many of his shows here. Yeah.
Any favorites of that?
Company, Sweeney Todd. The Act Theater, in co-production with the Fifth Avenue, is about to do a show called Assassins. My good friend Chris Monroe will be playing that one while I'm at the Village. But that's an edgy show. That's a lot of fun. Yeah.
Nice. Okay, so one quick question. We always like to have a bonus question at the end to kind of throw you off a little bit. If you were to have a selection of Otter Pops in front of you, what would be your favorite flavor?
Blue.
The blue. There it is. Real quickly, what are you doing now? What are you working on these days?
What am I working on these days? Right this second, we're doing How to Succeed in Business Without Really Trying. Very, very funny show. I hope everybody wants to see this one. Then I go right from here to the Village Theater for My Heart is the Drum, and then other things. So,
Paul, it's been a pleasure. Thank you so much for taking the time. This has been a lot of fun. Thank you very much. Paul, we'll see you again soon. Thank you.
Okay.
We're out of here. Take care.
Ta.